What's going on, family? Welcome back to the Mist Podcast. It's your boy, Aero Mist. Today I'm going to be talking about another topic that somebody else has given me, which is about crystals, the application of crystals, how to use them, how they work in general, everything about that. So we're going to go from the science to the spiritual, and we're just going to kind of back and forth on it. I'm going to start with the science of it. Now, understanding crystals is just understanding basic geology, right? They're formed by being underneath a significant amount of pressure. Many are formed underneath different types of conditions. And it's kind of the same thing as like you as an energetic being, you being born into this world in a lower dimension. This lower dimensional form that you are in, this third dimension in this body. When you came out, there was a lot of energy that was in place affecting you, which is why you have an astrological chart. Now, I'll probably talk about that a little bit deeper in a different video, but to emphasize necessarily on how that, like the influence of that, it not necessarily depicting like your traits or who you are as a person or whatever else, but it's just understanding that there was all this energy in different places that at one specific time when you were conceived and brought into the world, all of these were having an influence on your energy to some degree. And that's kind of the entire reason why, you have astrological stuff going on. As, the signs and like all of these things do matter. So when we bring this back to crystals specifically, crystals themselves are an entire geological stature of moving particles. I say moving, vibrating particles, just like how you are vibrating particles. And thus, they also have a vibrational emission, and they also conduct certain ones, if not a lot of them, conduct electricity, some more than others. For instance, serpentine. If you take that, you wrap it in copper wire, you go put it in the sun, and then you bring it into a dark room, that bitch will glow. That will glow because of the physioelectricity. So, from the science part of this, we understand that crystals themselves withhold energy. They withhold the same capabilities that we do as humans to be able to affect the aura or affect the energy, the biosphere of wherever that might be. And another good example is quartz watches. They literally use quartz as a form of physioelectricity in watches. And they also use it in other devices as well. But this is just remembering that you are an electrical being, I'm an electrical being, and these geological rocks also are electrical. They have a vibrational frequency emission. They have all of the same properties as you. But the one thing that you could say are lacking is the propositional point of thought. And this is where your interaction to them can become very intricate. Now, this is when we start moving into like, okay, we understand what the crystals are, their geology, their rocks. Why do they have colors? The colors are light fixtures. You have a light fixture yourself. You emit a light fixture as an entity. And the crystals themselves have a light fixture literally embedded into them. And that's why they are different crystals, because all of their formations are underneath different specifications, etc. So understanding that crystals themselves, like as we know it, are underneath the same premise as us to some degree, which means that they also hold the same capabilities and properties of healing and affecting your energy, because that's what we start getting into with understanding how it affects you spiritually is now. And if anybody looks into like the studies of people holding and withholding mass amounts of like quartz or mass amounts of rose quartz or mass amounts of amethyst and all those kinds of things, there's a specific energetic change that comes with withholding these crystals around you. And when you start incorporating, wrapping them in copper and doing things like that, that's when you're really starting to escalate and emphasize on how I can utilize them. Now, to give you an example, I sell crystals. You can go to aeromist.xyz or aeromist.myshopify.com to go check those out. And I also sell paintings and merch and stuff like that. Small little plug. But whenever I wrap a stone, I understand that what I'm doing with this stone is taking its energy, encompassing it into a sphere of its own with the copper that I'm putting around it, And then I'm implying a healing venture around that, which means that my energy, I am leaking that into this at an infinite point to be intertwined in its own gravitational pull. And everything that has energy at a central point of gravity has a gravity pull, which is why these crystals can gravitate towards you just like you can gravitate towards people and people can gravitate towards you. It's almost everything's underneath the same law and underneath the same premise for the most part here. Like, obviously we know the big difference between a rock and between you is all these other things, but like at a spiritual representation and an energetic level, you hardly have any differences between you and most of the things in what you would consider physical reality anyway, because everything has the same contextual properties. This lighter is the same thing, and even lighters use quartz. That's what's being used in here to make the spark. The spark, that is because of quartz. So it's ironic how in many different areas crystals are used for electricity, just like you are an electrical being. And all these other things, let's go to a better example, a pencil. This still has vibrating molecules. This still has energy. This still has a frequency. Now, because of its makeup, its chemical makeup and its properties and how it was made, it's not withholding the same type of properties, energy, and capabilities. And that's why these have an entirely different stature as stones and as crystals than compared to something that is like a pencil or like, something that's, you could say, more inanimate, but I would say more of its molecular structure is less based upon representing energy that it reciprocates outward rather than it does being nothing but a small proportional tool. And for the most part, just about everything is a small proportional tool, one way or another. Some things are used for different measures than others. So when you're looking at crystals, you're trying to interact with the crystals, then it's just important to understand what you are putting into the crystals themselves, energy-wise, and what crystals you have around you and how they're affecting you. Now, I'm going to go from two sides here. If you are someone that wants to put crystals out there into people, then I do think not only is it important that you understand the properties of whatever crystals you have, right? But it's understanding some of the science of like the light fixture. If you can find the microscopic science of how the molecules are vibrating in it via something like that. Because there's a long list of that, obviously, with so many different stones and so many different ways different stones are even created to, it's a deep rabbit hole in itself that is like a whole video all on its own that is only science-based and has nothing to do with the spiritual side. Remember, this is more of the channel of spiritual representation, understanding, embodiment, and being able to completely fluctuate with those so that you can have everyone can go see the science, but putting things together from the spiritual to the science, because they're very coherently intertwined, is making sure that we understand both parts. So when it comes to, for instance, a lot of the crystals that I have and I sell them, I don't really think about like selling them in mass or anything like that. I always know that the crystals gravitate people to them that are going to buy them because they need it for something specific. And then when I'm encompassing my energy into it, now we're playing a whole different type of ball game with what you're trying to accomplish. And anybody can do this with whatever crystals that you have, is that you are also, and these can be like amplifications to your manifestation or amplifications to your energy, cleansers to your energy. They have so many different representations. So from all the spiritual layers of whatever you might be trying to accomplish, just like how I can write down on a piece of paper what I want to manifest, I also can technically put that in the crystals that I decide to put around me, knowing what those crystals are doing. And I also can interact with those crystals energetically because they are already emitting a vibrational frequency, which then me imposing my energy onto those crystals is also going to create some form of amplification. And anything that you pose your energy upon is technically you being in like a counteractive orbit to each other, which then amplifies a signal, right? Kind of like this. if you know what this representation is of two things that are circling around into each other, and then eventually intersecting, and almost as if they're making a current, an energetic current. And if we understand that everything is energy, then what crystals are able to do is amplify or help you manipulate or help you utilize energy into more concrete ways than, previously thought. But crystals are just another medium, right? Because they're the science is there and all those things are there, but you as an entity, and I think some people forget this, you are capable of anything and everything without mediums, right? Mediums, crystals being a very phenomenal medium, can definitely aid and help in different ways, but I think it's still just remembering the power that you have as a biological, living, energetic, multidimensional entity, that you can still interact and do all the same things that you would attempt to do without the medium. It's just the medium somehow helps people ground themselves into this realization that their power is existing. And I think that's just more of a subconscious training that people have been put in their heads, that like they are not as powerful themselves and they have to rely on some of these things. And that's why I even pros to put them out into the community by any means, is because I know that there's people that are taking those mediums just as seriously as some people take my words. And that itself is something important to remember to value, is that there are layers and many, many layers to our reality, to the consistency of our reality, to how we exist, why we exist. And if you are trying to accomplish a specific type of goal by putting energy out into the world, then it's very important to make sure that you touch on some of the mediums, or at least, if not most of the mediums, so that you can heal your community effectively if that's your goal. Now, that's my goal, so that's why I do that. Now, if you are just mainly looking at this more for how do I help myself, or how do I encompass my energy even into other things that are a little more spiritually inclined and spiritual based, is going to probably be still having this same understanding and spiritual representation of what crystals are, how they work, how you interact with them. And because they are good amplifiers, it's good to be able to take those same lessons and then apply them to other things, because everything is still a representation of energy. It's just there's a clear distinction on some things withholding more energy than other things, and also how you apply the application of those things can also be different depending on your medium. So it's always good to understand what you're working with, even if it's like writing things down on paper, right? You're writing your manifestations, you're putting your energy into something like that, you're doing sigils, you're doing anything along those lines. So we understand the science here of the crystals. We understand more of the energetic representation and the energy and what's going on that side of things. And now it's just understanding what crystals you really are trying to manifest to you and bring to you, and what you're trying to accomplish. Once again, so Google can be your best friend. To be honest, I am still trying to find more resources outside of just Googling everything, because revalidating what you're being told by what you find on Google can be a little iffy. So always also make sure that you kind of double check your references with this kind of stuff. We're in that age of like the getting to the post-truth side of reality, where getting the actual truth behind some things can be very fabricated. So it's also good to do your due diligence. I also need to talk about this. There are crystals that are not real. There are man-made crystals. There are crystals that are not legit crystals, and you need to watch out for those if you're going to be interacting or dealing with crystals. So, warning, warning, warning sign. Make sure you understand what you're getting before you ever buy it. So if you're going to go to a crystal shop, for instance, make sure that whatever crystal you're getting is a naturally formed crystal, because a lot of these crystal shops I see will sell fake crystals, and not exactly pros to say that they're fake, or maybe they're not necessarily quote quote fake. I would say fake, yeah, because they're man-made. But what you're looking for when you look for crystals and trying to represent energy as effectively as possible is going to be finding something that is withholding its energy from its natural state that it came out in the planet, because that's what's holding all those millions of years of energy to it. as well. You have to remember energy has information, and every time you hold a geological rock that has been put underneath all these pressures, it's probably taken who knows how many years of energy, how many years of information embedded into this. And yes, information, although you would think isn't as transferable through something like a process like that, well, it definitely is, and it always is. And all the information that you have inside of your existence is a transferable point of information, and the difference between what is taken up when that is projected outwardly is just how another observer or perceiver intakes it. And plants are a very good understanding of that medium, because you can sit there and you can interact with them and you can play around with them in a way of manipulating their environment or exfoliating on their environment and things like that. And it's like they have their own communication system, they have their own way that they do things and whatever. And so it's under the same premise that you still have an embedded transfer of information within a plant, within a fungus, within everything that is, you could say, quote, quote, living, but is, I would say, because, the whole talk about consciousness and what is conscious, I guess that's, that's another good topic to go into later. Just what's consciousness, and like what we dignify is or is not conscious, because if you put it into some terms, technically these crystals are conscious. Just giving the obvious understanding and comparison that we were able to give earlier, but that goes into a whole different topic of, what do you deem conscious and what you don't. I will blanketly, in the form of this, to say anything that has an energetic representation or energetic signature and can manipulate energy, even if that's not a conscious act, quote, technically it's still underneath an unconscious affiliation, which means that there is still some type of conscious going on, and it's humane intent behind things is also a part of how we interact with these crystals, because your intent, just like how writing down your manifestations are the same concrete representation of intent that you put behind the crystals and what you bring into them, and there's something that you literally can put your energy directly into, and you can have this interactability on many different levels. So understanding that what crystals you have, if you're going to get them, if they're real or not, there are tests that you can do for that. There's just some crystals that are sold as man-made crystals too, and so you have to do your due diligence on knowing what some of the crystals are. And if you want to expand on those crystals, then you can always do things to charge them. Charging them is basically adding more expansive energy to the field of whatever it is, and this can be in the sunlight, in the moonlight, burying them in the ground, wrapping them in copper wire, and also putting them in the ground, or doing any of the above. Incorporating copper wire for any reason by any means can expand the electromagnetism and the electricity going on in the biosphere of the crystal itself. So it's very important that getting into crystals, that you do not be ignorant or blind to some of these things. And even if you're just getting them, but you're just keeping some good intention behind them, and you might not be the most educated, that's fine. Just as long as you are understanding the intention, right? You are the mass manipulator of energy, of frequency, of vibration, of observing it, of reciprocating it. And so when you pros intent behind something, upon something, then when you interact with a crystal, you are having this amplitude of your energy outwardly. And even just keeping them around you, and even just thinking about it in your mind of like how the crystals are, what they're doing. And this goes into another deep topic of also the placebo effect. It's crazy how a lot of these topics I have are just interconnected things, and we could have a very long prose on all of them. But they'll all get their own video so that we can go over each one intricately, so everyone gets an understanding if you're listening. The more educated you are when you handle something that has a spiritual back to it, and most things do have a spiritual back to them, but when you really pay attention to the spiritual backing behind something that has a very concrete representation like crystals, the more educated that you are is going to be the better off that you are using them. And that's just from the basic parts of everything I've told you, and doing a little bit of your own research on what crystal it is, what effects it's supposed to be prominent for, etc. And so it's important to also know these things, because if you're bringing crystals into your bubble and you're trying to accomplish a specific type of goal, then I'm not going to say that any type of crystal is going to hurt you by any means, but I would say that like the level of help that you can have via those crystals can be more exponential or less exponential based on what ones you have, according to what you're trying to manifest, bring around you, accomplish, create your space, evolutionize your space, evolutionize yourself. And also on top of, however, you might be trying to give that back out to people if you're trying to maybe not necessarily be somebody that sells crystals avidly to a lot of different people, but you want to do something cool for your friends and for people that you care about and the people that you love and whatever else, and encompass some good energy there, then absolutely go for it, but make sure that you don't do it blindly. And I will admit I've done it a little blindly. Mainly, I've been not blind to the science of it, but slightly blind to how and what crystals, like what properties they have, how to utilize the properties they have, all those kinds of things. So I've even had to educate myself a lot on it, but just making that step forward on like knowing what you're trying to achieve and being involved in it will exponentially help and transform everything that you're trying to do. So if anyone has any questions at all regarding crystals, or you want to give me a topic, a question to talk about, whatever it is, and all my DMs and all my socials are open, tap in with me, let me know you got, a podcast suggestion or whatever it is, and I will drop back on here and I will answer it and we'll go over it. Once again, if you'd like to check out the crystals that I have, arrowmist.myshopify.com or arrowmist.xyz. Links will be down in the description. Thank you guys so much for supporting the podcast, for listening. Sometimes when I do this, I really try to make the representation of it practical, understandable, and leave some things for people to take, because obviously I'm not like, I don't have the backdrop here of like, bringing all the articles on Google and everything else. So, but I really try to do my due diligence on making sure that I'm providing accurate information. And if for whatever reason I end up finding out I'm not, then I'm also human. We're all humans, and we're only as good as what we think we know. And not everybody knows everything. So once again, even listening to me, do your own research. Make sure you have a good grasp and understanding of what you're handling, and be safe with everything that you have. You're healing, putting your energy out into the universe, interacting with these crystals, whatever it might be. Be safe. I believe in all of you. And until next time.